Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Winnie, and I know that it's been 32 years, but here we are. So welcome to Light in Law. It's basically a series where we demystify complex law concepts and make it simple. Now, if you've watched the previous video, you'll see that we have a series sort of on natural law theory, and today on this video we're going to be talking about positivism, or the positive school of thought. Get your book, get your pen, share this video, subscribe, push abi what they say, turn on your post notifications, and let's get right into this video. All right, so now what is positivism? You guys just breathe in and breathe out. It's going to be a bit complex, right? But don't be afraid. Positivism in general, they have the legal argument that law is man-made, right? And law is law as it is. Remember that for natural school of thought, we look more of law as the divine nature, law given to man by God. But for positivism, they are saying the complete opposite and saying that law is what man says law is. Now, for legal positivism, right, we have two schools of thought inside positivism, right? Just different branches. We have command theory of law and the pure theory of law. Now, the command theory of law was propounded by John Austin, and essentially, what is he saying in the command theory of law? John Austin says that law under the command theory of law is a command set by a superior being over inferior beings. Quite derogatory, but that's what the philosopher says, right? So he says that what law is a command that is set by a superior being over inferior being. He's saying essentially that in a state, right, in a sovereign state, the sovereign is the superior, and then obviously the people, the masses, are the inferior. And whatever this sovereign sets as law, positivism agrees that that is law. So that's essentially what the command theory of law argues. Now, there are certain elements, right, certain things about the command theory of law that we're going to be looking at as propounded by John Austin. The first one is that there has to be existence of a definite sovereign. So he says that there has to be someone that we can all point to and say, okay, this is the sovereign of this state. Could be the president, could be the king, could be the monarch, whatever, right? But there has to be a definite sovereign. Number two, this sovereign has to be without legal limitations. Basically, he's saying that this sovereign has to be someone that is above the law. If he's setting the law, he obviously has to be above the law, right? Also calling this sovereign the uncommanded commander. Sounds like a, you know, sounds like a very funny name. But basically, what it means is that the sovereign has to be without legal limitations to be able to set the law that is going to rule over the people. I know your brain is already ticking in criticisms like, how can this be what law is, right? It doesn't sound fair and all of that, but don't worry, sit down. We're just talking about what the law is about. We will go into the criticisms later. Number three, the subject, right? We spoke about the superior and the inferiors. Number three element is that these inferior people, they have to be in the habit of obeying the uncommanded commander, because they know that sanctions will apply if they do not obey. So you see that the sovereign, right, or the uncommanded commander has the power to basically vet out sanctions to the superiors, and this is what commands them essentially to obey the uncommanded command. Basically, these are the three elements of the command law theory. Basically, what we've said is that command law theory says that there are three elements, right? The command law theory. Number one, there has to be a definite sovereign, right? We have to say, okay, this is the sovereign of this state. Number two, this sovereign has to be without constitutional or legal limitation to his power. Basically, uncommanded commander is the commando, basically, of the whole state. Number three, the inferior people, right? The inferior people, they have to be in the habit of obeying this sovereign. If not, sanctions will apply. Now, let's look at the criticism of this theory of law. Now, so basically, John Austin is saying this is what law is. Let's criticize. Can this be what law is truly? Let's see. So, number one criticism, not every law is giving commands. Not every law is a commandment. What do I mean? For example, there are procedural laws, right? Procedural laws just tell you how things are supposed to be done. There are other laws that basically give you rights or confer rights on you or let you know what your rights are. Example, chapter 4 of the Constitution, which talks about your fundamental human rights. Now, these laws are not like criminal law that gives you a do and a don't and a sanction and all of that, right? So, if not every law is a command, How does this theory explain what law is? Do you understand? Number two criticism is, who exactly is a sovereign, especially in a democratic government? Come closer. Let's look at this. Now, in Nigeria, we know that we have the judiciary, the executive, right, and the legislature. Now, the common law theory says that we should be able to point and say this is the sovereign of our state. In our Nigeria or in any other democratic state like USA, right, who exactly is the sovereign? Is it the judiciary? Is it the legislature? Or is it the executive? We have something called checks and balance for a reason. Separation of powers so that everybody is curtailed, everybody is checked and balanced, essentially. And so, in a democratic government or in a democratic setting, in a modern democratic setting, it's hard for us to say, okay, this one person is the sovereign. So, how exactly is this theory going to be applied in this peculiar situation? So, that's the number two criticism. Number three, I particularly like this criticism. Now, John Austin says that in his third element, that essentially the people, the inferiors, right, that are under this superior, they have to be in the habit of obeying law because they fear sanctions. Now, there are some people that don't do bad things because they fear sanctions. They just do good things because they are disciplined people, maybe you're in a class and there's this one person that doesn't cheat and there's this one person that is always quiet and is always playing by the rules, not because they cannot chess. Do you know testing? Like when the teacher comes and they want to flog, exactly, it's not because they cannot like bear sanction, but they are just quiet and disciplined because that's who they are, essentially, right? So not every inferior obeys law or keeps with law because they are afraid of sanctions, because most people, they are not afraid of sanctions. In fact, if you're saying that people will keep away or people will keep to law because they're afraid of sanctions, then we shouldn't have prisons or police officers or law enforcement agents, right? Because nobody should be committing crime. But alas, people still commit crime. So that's the third criticism. There are many other criticisms to the common law theory that I'm going to allow you to go and read your textbook and find out. Now, the second branch or stem or whatever of positivism is the pure theory of law. This may get complex, so come closer and breathe in and breathe out. You have the spirit of understanding. Okay. So now, for the pure theory of law, it's propounded by Hans Kelsen, right? And what he says is that laws tells us what to do, and essentially, a law is only law if we can trace that law to the ground norm. Did I speak gibberish? Let's try again. Hans Kelsen says that there's an hierarchy. Think of a pyramid. Yeah, think of a pyramid or a triangle, right? And he says that every law must derive its validity from a law that leads to the ground norm. So the ground norm is the law down here. Hey, Holy Ghost, help us. The ground norm is the law down here, right? Don't worry, when I give an example, you get okay. What is Hans Kelsen saying? He's saying that any law that we're able to trace to the ground norm is valid, whether it's ethically correct or not. Now, think of it as, let's think of the Evidence Act, for example. The Evidence Act is a valid law because it was made by the National Assembly. The National Assembly is a valid body because it's provided for in the Constitution, and the Constitution is the ground norm. So do you see what I was talking about, pyramid and triangles? He's basically proposing that if we can trace law, right, to the ground norm, then that law is valid. He doesn't care whether or not it is morally, ethically, or religiously wrong. That law is valid. Essentially, Hans Kelsen is saying that, look, as far as this particular law can be traced to the validity of every norm, and then that norm leads to the ground norm. The ground norm is the Constitution, right? Then that law is valid. And until it is amended or proved or amended or whatever, then that law has to be law, whether it's morally or ethically or religiously incorrect or correct. Right. So I'm sure you can already think of criticisms. So let's get right into the criticisms of Hans Kelsen command law theory. Number one criticism is that it is already looking draconian and authoritative and without checks and balance, all of those stuff. If we accept any law as it is, without morals, without anything included inside of it, right, it's going to lead to a draconian or like a authoritarian society, basically, because it says here that he doesn't care whether the law is good or bad. Law is law and must be seen as such. Now let's take slavery for example. Slavery for some people is like obviously terrible, as it's supposed to be for all of us. And then there's some other people that are like, look, we need slaves to do our work and all of that. If it's a law, let it go. Good or bad is irregardless of whether that other person feels like good a human being or not. We need slaves and they should give us our slaves. Don't abolish slavery. So we can see that in that sense, it leads to like a very disorderly and anarchic, chaotic community and society, basically, because slavery cannot be allowed, right? In the sense that there's a particular sense of people that it is denying their basic human rights. So, number two criticism is that the pure theory of law divorces morality and religion and all of those things from what law is. And essentially, we know that a very basic element or a very basic feature of law is that law is dynamic. It should be able to change with the society that it is meant for. Law is not supposed to stay static. If not, it will become archaic, right? But now this law is saying, this theory rather, is saying that, look, law minus ethics or minus morality minus everything, law should be law as it is. It should not be contaminated with religion and ethnicity and all of that. But the people that you want to obey this law are people in the society, and people are full of morals and ethnicity and all of those things. So we can see how this law does not just marry with the general understanding of what law should be. But three, and the last criticism, is that this law propounds that there has to be a ground norm. So you can see that there has to be an hierarchy. Every law should be able to, trace specifically what law it derives its validity from, and that whole chain must lead back to the ground norm. Now, in certain conditions and in certain climes, the ground norm is not very easy to identify. For example, let's say now we're a democratic government, right? And we're saying, oh, the constitution is our ground norm. What happens if there's a military regime or there's a coup d'etat or there's something, right? What happens? What law becomes the ground norm since the constitution has been suspended? I'm not going to tell you the answer. I want to leave the answer in the comment section. So essentially, we see that we have basically seen what positivism is, right? We have spoken about positivism as a whole. We've spoken about the pure theory of law that is propounded by Hans Kelsen, and we've spoken about yes, and we've spoken about the command theory of law that's propounded by John Austin. We've looked at the criticism from each side exactly. So now you essentially have an idea of what positivism is or what the positive school of thought is, right? Right. Essentially, that's positivism, that's positive school of thought, right? If you have any other questions, if you have any other comments, make sure you put it in the comment section. Tag, tag, send this video to somebody, send this video to a student that is maybe struggling with positivism or they don't just get the general gist. Remember that what these videos are supposed to do for you is give you the general gist and point you back to your textbook. I did a video on textbook recommendations, but for you to get more information, what I'm saying, check Introduction to Legal Method by Abiola Sani, and also check Legal Method by Ese Malami. You can also check the Province of Legal Method as well, just so that you get an all-round understanding of positivism. I hope this video was helpful. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so that you're going to see the next video when I post. All right, bye guys. Peace out.